Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur b'yohalecha, mi yishkam b'har kodshecha, holech tamim u'foel tzedek, v'dover emes v'lvavo, lo ragal al lashona lo lasora eo ra'ah v'cherpala no sal krovo, nivza be'enav nimas v'sirei Adonai yechabed, nishba l'harav v'lo yomir kasva lo nosam v'neshech v'shochad al noki lo lakach, osa ela lo yomot le'olam. We're here today to pay our respects to beloved husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, Rabbi Herman ben Meir, Zichrono Livracha. I don't know a better way to describe Rabbi Roszler than to refer to him as I've always thought of him as a Torah Yid, a very special individual who I've had the pleasure, the privilege to know for a handful of years, first as a visitor to our community, and then as he and his wife moved to the community, and as a person who I had the privilege of sitting next to every day at the Daf Yomi Shir, literally next to me on my right, and watching his dedication, his Mesiras Nefesh, for everything that he did, particularly when it came to davening and when it came to learning. He had a tremendous sensitivity for others. He didn't like the fact that others would go out of their way for him. In the morning, he would often leave the daf a few minutes early because he thought that possibly the aide would be waiting downstairs to take him home, and he didn't want them to have to wait the extra half a moment or moment. Just that tremendous sensitivity for others. And he appreciated the good deeds that everybody did for him. I think he was actually a living, walking Musar Sefer. You came to Minyan in the morning, and you saw how he came and how he had difficulties, as we know, physical difficulties coming in. He had to put his stick down and it would fall. And then he would sit down to put on his talis and tefillin. And he had difficulty getting the talis on and keeping it on, but always with a smile and always with an appreciation when someone would come in and try to help him. And he was so respected because people saw how difficult it was, but how he did it with such dedication, with such love. In the parsha that we just read, Parsha Shoftim, the Torah tells us that the king, the Melech, had two Sifrei Torah. Unlike all of us, the rest of us, where we have a mitzvah to write one Sefer Torah, the Melech had to have a Mishneh, a Sefer Torah. He had two Sifrei Torah. And our rabbis tell us one Sefer Torah he kept at home. He kept locked up at home. And the other one he took with him wherever he went. What's the idea behind that? So the idea is that the king's life was completely built on the principles of Torah. His foreign policy, his domestic policy, how he ran the country, how he ran his family, everything he did was based on Torah. And that's why it was important, because the king, of all the challenges that he had, that everything he did in life had to be guided by Torah. Because it's easy to get swayed, pulled in different directions, particularly if you're the king. Everything the king did was done al pi Torah. That's the way Rabbi Herman ben Meir lives his life. Everything was based on Torah. What does the halacha say about this? What does the halacha say about that? How do we do this? What's the right way to do it? And he didn't have to ask, because he knew. He knew what the halacha was. He was a Talmid Chacham. Sometimes I find in the daf that if I would be saying something, or the Gemara, he would start, without even looking inside, he would just start to mumble the words ahead, because he knew it. He had learned it before many times. He was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. But as I mentioned before, and I refer to him, I mean it seriously, when I mean a Musar Sefer. Our Chazal tell us, the Gemara tells us in Maseches Yuma, that there were various great people in our history that were role models for us. For example, the Gemara tells us Hillel Mechayim es Hoaniyim. Hillel was a very poor man, and despite his poverty, he found the time to learn and become the great Hillel that he was. And then Warren lists other people that were obligated us because of the fact that despite his poverty, look what he became, or despite this, despite that. And I was thinking, here is a man who came to shul every day, if he was able to. And he came to learn every day. And it was a struggle for him. How many times do we get up in the morning and we have a struggle, a difficulty? We didn't get off to a good start. Maybe we didn't get a good night's sleep. We don't always start off in the right mood. And sometimes we don't always push ourselves. Rabbi Roszler, every day, day in and day out, every day was a struggle, a physical struggle for him. He was in pain. It was difficult for him. But he did it with such love and dedication and devotion. He was a Musar Sefer. Maybe he wasn't someone who lived with Torah. He was a Sefer Torah. He really taught us through example. His life was, everything he did was with Mesiras Nefesh, with dedication. The things we take for granted that he did. But he didn't complain. At least I didn't see him complain. He didn't complain. He would sit down in the room and get himself comfortable, and then he wanted to have a cup of tea. Part of the Daf Yomi, of course, is you start off with a cup of tea or coffee. Can we get you one? No. He would insist on doing it himself. Sometimes I'd come, I'd make myself a cup of tea, and I'd come to the counter where the hot water is. Rabbi Roszler, can I do it for? No. Rabbi, can I get you a cup? Oh, no. Definitely not having you get me a cup of tea or coffee. That would be beyond. But he did it with such love and such devotion and such enthusiasm. It was a Musar Sefer. I learned from him that if I came in not such a good mood that day for whatever reason, look what he went through to get there. Look what he went through day in. And then when the morning was over and he'd leave, he'd be back for Mincha again with the same struggles, coming in and coming out. And sometimes he would forget. He'd forget his stick, or he'd forget something else. And you'd bring it over, and he had such appreciation for every little thing in life. He really was a true role model. I will miss him. I really will. He became like a friend, like a mentor. And that's why I think all of us, even this morning, when I walked into the Daf Yomi room and I mentioned a few people that hadn't gotten the message, they all came. Because they felt that he was so much a role model and example for all of us. Someone that we can learn from. We can learn from his life. The difficulties of his life, which we'll hear more about from his family, his life, what it was like. But he was truly a role model for all of us. Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory for his dear wife. He had a lovely marriage, a wonderful marriage for so many years. He loved his family so much, his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He took such pride in all of them. May he be a Melitz Yosher, which I know he is, and he can truly go up to the Kisei HaKavod and tell the Ribono Shel Olam, I had a hard life, but I was devoted and dedicated to you. I was dedicated to the Jewish people. I was dedicated to Am Yisrael. Please make things better for all of us in the future. I'd like to begin by asking his son, Dr. Meyer Roszler, to share a few words with us.
My father's name was Tzvi Elimelech. He was named after his great-great-grandfather. His great-great-grandfather was the Bnei Yissaschar, or Tzvi Elimelech Medinev. Tzvi Elimelech Medinev was a Rebbe Hashmelech, and he was a rabbi of a small city, but he wrote the Hasidic manual. What Gray's Anatomy is to a surgeon, the Bnei Yissaschar is to a chassid. And it's just a daily book that they would study and they would learn. He had a little brother, unfortunately, who was killed during the war, whose name was Yecheskel. He was named after Yecheskel Panet, who was known as the Mari Yecheskel, who was a chief rabbi of Transylvania and wrote many Sforim under the Mari Yecheskel name with Shilas and Shuvas. Furthermore, he was related through his great-grandfather to the Kuntras Asfekas, who's a brother of the Ksos HaChoshen, who came from Tosos Yontif. And on his other side, he was related to Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, who traced his yichus back to the Maram of Padua. Maram of Padua is Reb Meir Katzel Ellenbogen, who lived in Padua, Italy. Reb Meir Katzel Ellenbogen, who lived in Padua, Italy, traced his yichus back to Rashi, and Rashi, of course, traces yichus back to King David. And Zaidi was always very proud of his yichus and always tried to impart to us as children that we came from a chain of unbroken chain from King David. Zaidi was a shtetl Jew. They don't make Jews like that anymore. He came from the little townish Borgo, Pundel Borgo. It's a little village in the middle of the Carpathian Alps in a valley. It's so remote that Brad Stoker decided when he wrote Dracula, that's where Dracula came from. And it had around 2,000 people in it, of which 20% were Jewish. And life in the shtetl, which he lived for his 14 years, was typical. You had a Rav, you had a Shochet, you had the Shamus. He would relate to us about Pesach, how they turned the Shamus' house into the Pesach baking factory. He related to us how the Shochet used to come shech the animals for them. And one of the things he related to us was how he had to go to Cheder. And Cheder was in the morning and afternoon. And in Borgo, the Cheder teachers were not PhD candidates. They were simple Jews who came from other little cities. And if you didn't know your stuff in Cheder, you get hit. So he'd get hit in Cheder often. And he had to learn a tremendous amount. Every Parsha Vayechi, he would come to me and he would say, you know, Parshas Vayechi is one of the most difficult parsha I had as a boy, because the Rashi and Parshas Vayechi are very, very long. And he actually remembered the tunes that he used for Cheder. Vani b'voim padam mesa alai Rachel. And he would sing the tune, then he would sing the translation in Rashi, which he knew by heart. And after he would go to Cheder, then he would have the opportunity, and it was not opportunity, it was mandatory, that he would have to go to Romanian or Hungarian public school. And there he would have to get hit again, because they would have to go on Shabbos, and he would refuse to write on Shabbos. So it was, even though it was fairly idyllic life in the shtetl, for a little boy, it was a little challenging. In 1944, his family was taken to the Klosenberg or Cluj ghetto. And from there, they were taken to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, him and his brother, Yitzchak Shmuel, whom my son's named for, were separated from them. And in Auschwitz, his mother, his father, and his brother and his sister were killed immediately. And Zaidi was shipped off to the Mauthausen concentration camp. And from the Mauthausen concentration camp, he was shipped off to a little subcamp called Ebensee. Ebensee was one of the, they're all horrible, but it was one of the worst places in the world. They had quarries, which they were supposed to make the V-1 rockets in, that he had to dig out, and instead they turned it into petroleum factories. And it's a place where people became less than human. Fathers killed children for food. It was just this horrible, horrible place. And he and his brother were there for a year. Unfortunately, his brother, Yitzchak Shmuel, died a couple of days before he was liberated by the Americans. Once he was liberated by the Americans, here he was, a 15-year-old boy, and he had to get around Europe himself. So he had to switch from the American zone to the Russian zone, back to the American zone. Luckily, he had a couple cousins that helped him a little bit, and he ended up in the Felderfink displaced persons camp. And he found out that since he was an orphan, at the time he was 17 years old, he was able to come to America on a special orphans visa. And so in 1947, he came to America, and Zaidi spoke 6 languages, but English wasn't one of them. And he came in, and he didn't speak a word of English, but what happened was his cousins encouraged him, and he enrolled in Torah Das Yeshiva in the high school and yeshiva. And somehow, particularly because of his gift for languages, he was able to graduate high school in a year and a half. He told me he had a lot of trouble passing English, and he went to college after that. Meanwhile, he studied for smicha. He got smicha at age 21. At the time, he was the youngest person to ever get smicha from Torah Das. Anyway, after he became a rabbi, he ended up being an Orthodox rabbi in the 50s. Wasn't exactly a very good job, particularly if you had an accent and you're European. There were, first off, a lot of rabbis, and there weren't many Orthodox places. So he ended up in a little shtetl, a little city called Hornell, New York, for 4 years. When he was there, through a vacation, he met my mother. They got married. And then he ended up becoming the rabbi of Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth, Minnesota at the time was a city with a well-defined Orthodox community with 2 big shuls. And when he got there, he saw that the mikveh took it was a little weak. He said that there were many great Rabbanim before him. There were big Talmidei Chachamim, but they used a lot of heterim, and he didn't like it. So in the 1960s, he actually built a mikveh in Duluth, Minnesota, which was really incredible. He explained to me how they did it, how they cut ice out of Lake Superior and they let it melt. Meanwhile, although Duluth was a bigger city, they didn't have a day school. So once my sister, Razel, got to be 5 years old, he had to move, and they moved to Los Angeles. He became head of the OU for the California region. This is before the OU had really kashrus division, and the OU was a good job, but they didn't pay him. So he got into business, and he owned a daycare center, a nursery school, which he owned for many, many years. And just one little quick story about Zaidi. When Zaidi came to America, he had a lot to learn. He didn't speak English. He had no way of making money. He didn't understand the culture. And he managed to master all that. But there was something he never mastered, and that was sports. He just couldn't understand what sports was. When I would watch TV baseball, he would say, "I don't understand." A man takes a stick, he hits a ball, everybody gets up and claps, and they pay the man $1 million. He never understood it. And Razel told me this story. She probably doesn't remember, but Elizabeth was a good basketball player. And one of her games, he finally went to see one of her games. She was dribbling the ball down the court. The opposing player stole the ball from her. Well, apparently Zaidi got up from his chair and started running on the court to try and get the ball back. And Razel said she had to stop him. Anyway, Zaidi worked for 30 years in the nursery, and then he was able to retire young. And then he became a shul Jew. There was a shul, Beth Jacob of Beverly Hills, and he went to the Daf Yomi there. He did it 4 times, and it was his life. And it was just a fantastic thing for him. He loved it. Every day was something new. They had a kiddush, they had this, they had that. The Daf was fantastic. It was really a wonderful life that he had during his retirement, which was very long. And he managed to travel all over the world. And then he ended up in Cleveland. And he made a lot of friends in Cleveland. It wasn't his home, but this is what he did. I'd like to finish with a quick little story about my father. There was a very nice man. His name was Dr. Orden. And unfortunately, he had a malignant brain tumor. He was going to die. So he asked my father, how does he go on with his life? This was 40 years ago. It was in Shul. I was sitting there. I was 20 years old, maybe. And my father turned to him and he said, you have to have belief in emunah in God. He said, even in the depths of the concentration camp, when we didn't know if we'd wake up the next day, we still had emunah. And I said to myself, this is amazing. This man lost his whole family, his whole life. And he still has such belief, emunah, and bitachon in God. I said, I don't understand how he does that. But that was my Zaidi, and that's what the way he was. And thank you very much for coming.
Razel. Razel?
I used to call the month of Elul my father's favorite season, and it was. While other people were winding down their summer vacation, my father began a spiritual sojourn with joy and anticipation. He He would listen to chazanos every day, and every morning while davening at home, he would blow the shofar, alerting us, and probably the neighbors as well, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were on the way. My father's love of the glory of Rosh Hashanah, the awe of Yom Kippur, and celebration of Sukkot is only part of the legacy he leaves behind for his children and grandchildren. My father was a Holocaust survivor, but I believe that defined only part of who he was. He was a husband and father first. He was friendly and a friend. He was a rabbi and a great Talmid Chacham. He was a traveler and intellect, curious and worldly. He was a great storyteller. He loved to tell a good joke and would sneak forbidden cookies behind my mother's back. My father called my Texas-born mother his yellow rose. They met on a blind date, and it was 61 years of true love and respect. They put each other first. Together, their family came first. Growing up, my father ingrained love of family in us over and over again, and the four of us remained deeply connected. My parents set an example for the future by caring deeply for my mother's parents, my wonderful grandparents. Daddy was a friendly man. He was the last one out of shul on Shabbos. He struck up conversations with cab drivers, people on planes, and anyone he ran across on his daily life. He was always on the lookout for a new face in Los Angeles, and when he found them, he invited them over. We always had guests at our Shabbat table, Pesach Seders, and in the Sukkah. Many of these guests became lifelong friends of my family. My father mesmerized his children and grandchildren with tales from the Chumash. He brought Yaakov, Yosef, and Moshe to life right before our eyes. His love of Torah and the Orthodox Jewish lifestyle shone through in all his actions all the time. He makarived at least 2 families that I know of. He was a Baal Tzedakah. He served as head of the Vad of Chinuch for many years at my elementary school. He was Gabbai at Beth Jacob Congregation in Beverly Hills. Although he loved his life in Los Angeles, he looked forward to starting anew in Cleveland. Here he enjoyed the companionship and goodwill of many. Many people would consider my father to be a Talmid Chacham. He had a great mind and sharp memory. He could follow the Talmudic arguments across the millennia. He was really a humble man who was eager to share his knowledge and learn from others. So, Daddy, your legacy lives through your goodwill and your good deeds. You have proven that not only is it possible to survive, but it is also possible to survive and enjoy life to its fullest. While my father was so ill in hospice, my nephew Yoni blew the shofar for him, heralding in the month of Elul. This Elul will be a little different for my father and for us. My father will be celebrating Rosh Hashanah at God's side, and we will be here hoping to catch the sound of his voice. My father's dedication to Judaism has set an indelible example for our family. He is a shining light that will burn eternally in our memory. I want to thank you all for coming, and also to the caregivers who helped my father so much in these past few months, and to my brothers and my brother and my sisters, and my mother, who really helped make this a very, even though a difficult time, but a time of meaning. Thank you.
Esther?
I have to ask your forgiveness. I wrote this at 3:30 in the morning, and I don't speak anywhere near as well as they do. I'm the Los Angeles representative. I was 3 when I arrived in Los Angeles. As my brother mentioned, in Duluth, my father saw there was no future for his children, and we ended up in Los Angeles. As Meyer said, my father descended from the greatest Melitz Yosher known in Jewish history, and that was the Berkowitz-Kumin-Bookatz Rebbe. And when my father was near the end, I said several times, Daddy, be our Melitz Yosher, be our Melitz Yosher. Please continue what you've been doing for us our entire lives, because my father made his first priority to advocate for our family. And that meant first for his wife, in any way that he could help her, although my mother is a remarkably strong woman and in her own right. And then it was his children, whether it be Razel, who had pneumonia at UCLA, and the professor was going to force her to take that final. And my father called the professor and asked him to please show a little compassion. She's very sick. And he tried his best, but the professor said, okay, I'll let her take the test later, but remember who's grading it. And my father was very, very angry. But we always saw my father fighting for us. So I want to thank my father first, because I will forget, for teaching me to be a Melitz Yosher for my family and for the Jewish people. And how important it was. My father stood up for the Jews. He said, remember who you are, da me'ain bata le'ana ta'olech. Know from whence you came and where you're going. And I told my children, Jesse, Shimi, Eliana, and Shimi, one of whom is here today, Eliana, and this is being live streamed. I'm saying to my children, nieces and nephews, be Melitz Yosher for yourselves, for your family, for Jews. Fight this anti-Semitism that has come across the world that Zadie had to fight, and we will learn from him. Although this week's parsha is Parshat Ki Tetzei, I would like to draw upon the first pasuk of Lech Lecha. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha u'miladtecha u'mibeit avicha el haaretz asher areka. Similar to Avram, my father was uprooted at the age of 14 from his birthplace in Transylvania, the area of his forefathers and the center of all he knew, and was cruelly thrown into the hellfires of the Shoah. After surviving the concentration camps Auschwitz and Ebensee, he was cast adrift. Eventually, as I said, he made his way to Los Angeles. On the occasion of my father's 80th birthday, I was honored to be asked by my father to speak in his beloved minyan, affectionately called Benny's Minyan, at Beth Jacob Congregation of Beverly Hills, where my parents have been members for 50 years. This minyan is so popular that the regular daveners and the presidents of the main shul regularly rotate to the minyan because they feel it's such a Hamish, warm minyan. Nothing like the Beverly Hills area, which it's centered in. It gave my father such pleasure to see his daughter address him on his birthday, giving a Dvar Torah. Despite my father's strictly Hasidic upbringing and strict adherence to orthodoxy that he conveyed to all us children and grandchildren, he was very progressive in that he encouraged and expected his daughters and granddaughters, son and grandsons alike, to address the congregation, or family simcha, or what have you, as long as it was done kedat v'kedin. My father was the rabbi's rabbi of that minyan, and further, for the entire Beth Jacob congregation. He served as the gabbai of the main shul 7:40 a.m. daily shachris, and when Daf Yomi came to Beth Jacob, he participated in their 7 a.m. Daf Yomi shir. He was one of the speakers in the first international Siyum HaShas. Between all of his interactions in that shul, my father was known as the sage and dignified survivor who was also a Talmid Chacham. There is not a person in that shul, and it is a huge shul. It is the largest Orthodox shul on the West Coast. There was not a person in that shul that did not know him and did not respect him. Rabbi Top and Rabbi Steve Weil, the current and former senior rabbis of the shul, would often discuss halacha with him. After the last Rosh Hashanah that my father spent at Beth Jacob, I received an email from someone who said that my father's davening inspired him specifically on the Yamim Noraim to be a better Jew. Not a week went by that I didn't meet someone on the street or in a kosher market or at a car wash who did not have a kind, respectful, and loving word about my father. I received countless emails just yesterday from Beth Jacob members conveying their beautiful memories of my father's contribution to the shul. Most important of all is that my 3 children, Jesse, Eliana, and Shimi, grew up in the minyan and got to benefit from seeing their grandparents every Shabbos. They heard their Zadie speak in the minyan and daven for the Amud on so many occasions. And what joy it brought to my father to see all 3 of his Los Angeles kids in shul every week from the time they were 6 weeks old till they flew the coop, and even beyond when they came home for the holidays. Forgive me, it's a little disorganized. But my father, as Razel noted, had many facets to him. His fierce loyalty to his family, his unbelievable devotion to my mother, and that truly defines my father the most, I would say, is what an incredible husband he was and what a wonderful wife my mother has continued to be till the last day. His devotion to his family, his love of travel, his love of languages, his ability to adapt to new situations, which was so crucial to the many changes he had in his life, traumatic changes, and each change had brought its own challenges, and his unbelievable interest in the world's technological advances, He took computer classes as soon as PCs became popular and urged me repeatedly to get with the program. Unlike him, I'm not so good with change, but thanks to him, I am computer literate. On my last trip to Cleveland less than 2 months ago, I took my parents to the IMAX theater to see the film about our national parks. He and my mother had actually taken all of us to some because we went on road trips constantly and we didn't quite appreciate it at the time. But Mom and Daddy, thank you so much. When I look back at the pictures, it's amazing what you did for us. They had to work very hard in that nursery school. Any weekend that they could take off, we ran off to Palm Springs, San Diego, San Francisco, all road trips. Sorry we didn't behave very well and I was always throwing up. Anyway, at the IMAX theater, my father took a very bad fall. And I ran, and my mother got down on her knees too to try to pick him up. He said, I'm okay. And it was quite a bad fall, and he dusted himself off and walked with his walker into the IMAX theater. After seeing most of which they had actually been to, and later on had finished almost the entire tour of that national park video because they traveled so much. After that, my father said, okay, this is a museum. Let's see what else we can look at. And I said, I'm tired. I got to go home. Again, my father taught me intense loyalty to family, to stand up for ourselves, and to fight for what defines him, Judaism. On one of my father's birthdays many years ago, my mother surprised us by speaking after davening at Benny's Minyan. She quoted a short story called Hovering Above the Pit, taken from Professor Yafa Eliach's famous book, Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. To paraphrase, a famous Hasidic Rebbe, a Polish Hasidic Rebbe, and a free-thinking Jew became friends and intellectual debaters in a Polish concentration camp. The Nazis, in their cruelty, marched the inmates to a giant pit and announced, those who jump over successfully will live, and those who do not will be executed. The Rebbe, with his swollen feet and tired 50-something-year-old body, jumped together with the freethinker. Amazingly, they landed and survived. The freethinker asked the Rebbe, tell me, Rebbe, how did you do it? To which the Rebbe responded, I was holding on to the coattails of the merits of my ancestors, my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather of blessed memory. The Rebbe, in turn, asked the freethinker, how did you reach the other side of the pit? The freethinker responded, me? I was holding on to you. This sums up our family's feelings towards our father. He clung to God, taking him wherever he went, be it into the concentration camps of hell, and in the good times, and the simchas, and in the many, many, many hospital visits until his passing, where he actually recited Tehillim 36 hours before he passed out loud by heart. I hope that I and my children and the rest of my family will be able to draw strength from my father's unwavering faith, and we will make the leap over the pit every time as a result. I want to thank the entire Cleveland community, which in many ways surpasses the Los Angeles community, with their chesed and their amazing Bikur Cholim society. I want to thank our caretakers, who are also wonderful. Especially, I want to thank, most of all, my sisters, Razel, Elizabeth, Brian, and Josh, and most especially my mom.
Elizabeth?
When Moshe sees the golden calf, he smashes the tablets and then begs God to forgive the Jewish people. He says, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, may my Lord go among us, because it is a stiff-necked people, and forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. Previously, God said, I have seen these people, and they are stiff-necked. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them. Why would Moshe mention being stiff-necked as a reason to forgive the Jewish people, when it seems like it's the very attribute that God had been given for wanting to abandon them? So Rabbi Sachs cites Rabbi Yitzchak Nissenbaum, who explained that God should look upon the Jewish people with favor because what is now their greatest vice, will one day be their most heroic virtue. They are indeed an obstinate people. When they have everything to thank you for, they complain. Mere weeks after hearing God's voice, they make a golden calf. But just as now they are stiff-necked in their disobedience, so one day they will equally be stiff-necked in their loyalty. Nations will call upon them to assimilate, but they will refuse. They will suffer humiliation, persecution, even torture, and death because of their faith, but they will stay true to the covenant that their ancestors made with you. They will go to their death saying, Ani Mamin. This is a people awesome in obstinacy. And though now it is their failing at the golden calf, there will be a time in the far future when it was and will be their noblest strength. This was written by Rabbi Nissenbaum, who lived and died in the Warsaw Ghetto. So, for those of you who knew my father, it would be fair to say and describe him as having an awesomeness in his obstinacy. It was that tenaciousness that helped him not only survive the Holocaust, but enabled him to rise from the ashes, become a rabbi, a successful businessman, a wonderful husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. It is what gave him the perseverance to fix whatever was broke in our house growing up, no matter that he had no training in plumbing, carpentry, or mechanics. It is what helped him learn AOL and relocate to Cleveland at the age of 85 and become a respected member of this new community. My father, Tzvi Elimelech ben Meir, as you have heard, was named for his ancestor Tzvi Elimelech of Diniv, the Bnei Saschar. My father was very proud of his yichus. He was also related to the Barditchever, the Tosfos Yontif, and many other great scholars. But it says, Tov Shem Mishem Tov v'yam hamaved miyam hivaldo. A good name is better than good oil, and the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. My father was born with a good name because he came from a long line of prestigious rabbis. But his name was better at the time of his death because of who he was in his lifetime. Watching him go to shul every morning, learn Daf Yomi, no matter how tired he was or in how much pain, seeing that awesome obstinacy was inspiring. It gave him a Shem Tov, a good name. He put in all the effort, but he was also helped by so many of you. I have learned that numerous times that it takes a village to raise a child. But what I have learned over these past 2 years is that it takes a village to care for a parent. I want to thank my husband, Josh, for the incredible way he took care of my father, taking him to shul almost every Friday night, watching over him constantly to keep him safe, and for taking him to the mikveh. Thank you to my brother-in-law, Brian, who took him to shul almost every Shabbat day, and when my father was too weak to go, he davened with him at home. Thank you to Zev Kessler for taking my father to Mincha Mariv during the week, and Joey Steiner for taking him to shul on Sunday mornings. He considered you both his friends. Thank you to the many people in both Young Israel and Green Road who opened the door for him, helped him with his ever-slipping tallis or falling cane. Thank you to Rabbi Bernstein and Blau for allowing him to lead davening and feel like a valued member in your shuls. Thank you to all my friends who warmly embraced him and kibitzed with him during the Kiddush. And thank you to all my friends who supported me when I needed it. Thank you to my children for always being there for him when I could not be. Thank you to Kathleen, Kathy, Joe, Jody, Cindy, Liletta, Darlene, Angie, and Nancy, our caregivers that always treated my father with dignity and respect. As I said, it takes a village, and my siblings and I are so thankful to all of you. Now, as I say goodbye to my father, I am reminded of his favorite song, Kol B'Ramah. The words are from Yirmiyahu. Rachel Imenu is crying for her children, the Jewish people, and God says, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work shall be rewarded, and they shall come back to the land, from the land of the enemy. I say to myself and to everyone that is saddened by my father's death to wipe your tears, because his hard work was rewarded, his obstinacy paid off. He was a Torah Jew who loved to daven and learn and celebrate Shabbat, and through his sheer will and the help of his family and community, he was able to do that almost up to the day that he died. He leaves behind a good name and a family that loves him and will remember him and will carry on his traditions. And he has come back from the land of the enemy, the fires of Auschwitz, to be buried in the land of Israel.
Shira?
Before I start, I just wanted to take a minute on behalf of the grandchildren to thank our parents, aunts, and uncles for the care that you have given to Zadie. Some of you were born into the role of caregiver, while others married in and eagerly adopted it. But you have all shown us the mitzvah of kibud av ve'em. We just wanted to let you know that we've been watching you all this time and learning from your beautiful example. And of course to Zadie's Eisha Chayil, the matriarch of our family, Grandma, who has set the ultimate example for us all of what it means to love and care for someone unconditionally. Rabo banot asu chayil v'atalit al kulana. Many daughters have attained valor, but you have surpassed them all. Thank you all for coming today to celebrate the life of my Zadie. Harav Tzvi Elimelech Roszler, a man who loved his life with an intense passion for Judaism and love for his family. Just like with Akedat Yitzchak, where it writes, Vayashkem Avraham baboker, Zadie awoke each morning with zrizut. Even at the age of 87, he always woke up early for Shacharit, followed by Daf Yomi. On my most recent trip to Cleveland, I awoke at 5:30 a.m. for my return flight back to New York City. Zadie was already up and dressed for shul. He explained that every day Zev Kessler and Joey Steiner would give him a ride. He insisted on walking outside by himself in the pitch-black, icy street with his walker and waiting in the freezing cold for 15 minutes before his scheduled pickup time so he wouldn't make his ride wait, even for a moment. No matter how many times we explained that they were happy to wait for him, Zadie insisted on doing it this way. Even the Cleveland winter couldn't stop him. Vayashkem Zadie baboker. I can't thank you enough for taking him to shul. It meant so much to him and to our family. Grandma even joked yesterday that he should be buried in the shul because he loved it so much. Zadie's intensity towards doing mitzvot was paired with a soft, kind warmth that he displayed to all children. I have so many memories of being in Beth Jacob with Zadie, who greeted not only every adult but all the children as well. Kids loved Zadie. He could calm even the colikiest of babies. He always had a smile on his face, a silly way of meowing like a cat, and a tight squeeze for all the little polkas. Zadie showed us what it means to love Torah and mitzvot. Some of my best memories are making bow and arrows with him on Lag BaOmer, dipping eggs into ashes before Tisha B'Av, and watching him teach Gideon, his great-grandson, to shake the lulav in Esther Sue's sukkah. You would never know by looking at this smiling man that he suffered daily from intense physical discomfort and carried painful Holocaust memories with him always. He concealed this side of things from his grandchildren to shield us from any pain. Zadie always told his grandchildren that when we came to visit him, he would roll out the red carpet for us. Well, Zadie, I know that Hashem is rolling out the red carpet for you and welcoming you to Shamayim. Yehi zichrono baruch. May his memory be a blessing.
You want Juliana?
Please forgive me. It's having a little trouble. I just wanted to quickly read something that my sister sent me, who unfortunately couldn't be here. She's in LA. This is from my sister, and then I'll just quickly read something that I wrote. When I had a question of vital importance to me, last Friday night, I used a Judaica book Zadie gave me. Anything from him is precious now, but this book about Bereshit, evolution, and even, yes, dinosaurs which were obviously not his concerns, but given to me anyway because he knew I could benefit from it. Just one example of how he immersed us in love, in love of Torah, life, and love of family. I once heard that Tzvi is an acronym for Tzadik ve'emunato yichyeh. A righteous man and his faith will live. Nothing could be more true of Zaidi, who survived the Holocaust on his faith. I had always been fortunate enough that I could mark my calendar by his time, from hearing his voice on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Dreidel on Hanukkah, Tar Tisha B'Av fatwas. He has become the bookends to my year. Even more so, he has become the bookends to each day, from washing Nagelwasser to Shema al Hamita. His imprint is prominent. Having been lucky enough to grow up in, I've been fortunate enough that I could mark my, Having been lucky enough to grow up in LA with him, spend countless Shabbases at his house, trips together with cousins, he has ultimately become the bookends to my life, from my earliest memories of going to school at their nursery to the memories and impact I'll take with me today and forever. We will continue your commitment to Yiddishkeit and continue to tell your family story. Go to Hashem, go to your family, and just as the Berditchever Rebbe was the Sanigor of the Jewish people, please continue to be the Sanigor of our family. I said goodbye to my grandfather last Tuesday. This is me now. On Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day we start blowing the shofar, which lasts until the end of the month. The shofar is meant to be a wake-up call to remind us to always look for ways to improve. As it says in Treyasar, Im yitakesh shofar be'ir, ve'am lo yecharadu, im tihiyeh ra'a be'ir, v'Adonai lo asa. Will a shofar be sounded in the city and the people not quake? Will there be evil in the city if the Lord has not done it? But the shofar only serves its purpose for a month out of the year. For the other 11 months of the year, my Zaidi's hallmark quality, his voice, has served that purpose for me. Zaidi's voice, still so fresh in my mind, was so full of life. It magically rose to the top of all voices in a packed room full of daveners, no matter how sick or weak he was. It was striking. His voice could stop you in your tracks with a quick mm-mm, or melt your heart with one of his warm, upbeat greetings. A constant reminder to always work to better ourselves, his voice was a perfect metaphor for the person he was. Devoted, holy, understatedly strong, a force you could rely on to lift you up and simultaneously need to keep you grounded. I will forever close my eyes in shul and wait to hear his voice rise in his tuneless tune and then suddenly fall into a hushed prayer. Forever we'll be looking for him to wave to across the mechitza. Forever we'll hear his voice making kiddush, telling us how beautiful and lovable and huggable we are. The ach pleases, his 323 area code on his answering machine, the Mickey Mouse song that he sang. My biggest fear about losing someone is never getting to hear the person speak again. I'm heartbroken that it took the death of someone so special and important to me to understand the magnitude of that loss. Zaidi, while I won't get to hear from you again, I will continue to talk to you, and I hope you can still hear me up there. I miss you and your voice already, Mr. Magoo from Kalamazoo. I love you.
Last speaker is the grandson Aryeh.
A hero is defined as a person noted for courageous acts or nobility of character. And Zaidi, if I switched the word hero with your name, I'm 100% sure the same definition would appear. As a teenager, you were separated from your family and forced into back-breaking labor and were given every reason to give up, but you didn't. Teenagers nowadays struggle with the concept of motivation and failure to launch. But you never got that choice. Your choice was life or death. People don't realize how good we have it. Yes, life gets difficult from time to time, but without you, we wouldn't even have this thing called life to live. What amazed me most about you, Zaidi, was your dedication to your family and how you always put others before you. You had numerous failed back surgeries, yet just a couple months ago, you offered my brother your wheelchair because you saw he had an injured ankle. You didn't always agree with the opinions of your grandkids, but you at least gave us the opportunity to share our views before you promptly told us how wrong we were. It was once said, the secret to success is to find something you love to do so much you can't wait for the sun to rise to do it all over again. For you, that success was davening and learning Torah, and a lot of the nights you literally couldn't and wouldn't wait for the sun to come up to do it again. You came to America with next to nothing, and over a half a century later, your blessed soul leaves us with 4 beautiful generations of a family that you started. On some of the last days of your heroic life, your body was failing you, you were very sick, and you could have said anything you wanted to, yet all you were focused on doing was praising God for the life He had given you. I'm so thankful for the time we got to spend together. You're my hero, Zadie, and I love you.
Please rise for Kamal Rachmim. Rabbi Blau will please honor us with Kil Rachmim.
Malay Rachamim, Shochein, Bamramim. Hamsem Nuchon Nochonok and Fayashkina, Bimalos, Kdoshim Utarim. Kizora Kiamazirim, Et Nishmas, Rav Tzvi Melech Ben Meir, Shalach Leolamo. Bavur, Shnak Mispal Maraskars Nishmasa, Began Eden, Tehemenuchaso. Lachain balarachamim yesterday b'seitzer krafav liolamim yitzur b'torachim et nishmaso Adonai yunachalaso yunuk shlom mishkavav and amar amen.
You may be seated. The schedule is a little confusing, so bear with me for a moment. The Kvura is going to be in Eretz Yisrael in Beit Shemesh. The Shiva will begin here at the Sunshine Home 2524? Can't read my own writing. 2574 Ruby Vale in University Heights. The Shiva will be till Monday morning. There will be no minyanim until Sunday evening, where there will be Mincha Marav Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. and Chakras the last morning at 7:30 a.m. The times for Shiva have been posted, but I'll just go over them quickly. Today there'll be 2 to 5 and 7 to 9, and then Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday 9 to noon, 2 to 5, 7 to 9. Friday 11 to 2, Mostly Shabbos 9:30 to 11. I think we got that all. Okay, we'll take Kriya.